The city of Buckley was draped in an unnatural gloom, the kind of darkness that seemed to seep into the very soul of the place. Daniel Mercer, a journalist known for uncovering the city's darkest secrets, found himself drawn into this abyss one fateful spring night. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the distant wail of a siren and the faint, haunting melody of a flute. As Daniel walked, memories of his childhood flooded back. He remembered the times he and Sarah would explore the city's hidden nooks, their laughter echoing through the empty streets. Sarah had always been the brave one, leading the way with a sense of adventure that Daniel admired. Those memories seemed like a lifetime ago, but they still brought a smile to his face. The melody grew louder, pulling Daniel from his reverie. He followed the sound to a narrow alley, where the flickering light of a dying street lamp cast long, eerie shadows on the pavement. There he saw a woman standing in the shadows, her figure slight and almost ghostly. She played an ancient flute with an eerie grace, the music hauntingly discordant yet mesmerizing. As he watched, the shadows around her began to twist and writhe, coalescing into a dark, amorphous shape. Daniel's breath caught in his throat as the shape solidified into a creature, its form shifting like smoke. The creature lunged at a nearby figure, a homeless man who had been sleeping in the alley. The man didn't even have time to scream before he collapsed, his body convulsing as if struck by an unseen force. The woman, Marianne, lowered the flute, and the creature vanished back into the shadows, seemingly absorbed by the instrument. She turned her head slightly, her eyes meeting Daniel's for a brief, chilling moment. A chill ran down his spine as he felt a connection, a silent understanding passing between them. Then she was gone, disappearing into the night as quickly as she had appeared. Daniel rushed to the man's side, but it was too late. The man was dead, his eyes wide with terror. Daniel called the police, his mind racing with questions about the woman and the creature. He knew he had to uncover the truth behind what he had witnessed, no matter the cost. The next morning, Daniel sat at his desk, his mind still replaying the events of the previous night. He had spent hours at the police station, giving his statement and trying to make sense of what he had seen. The police were skeptical, chalking it up to a possible drug deal gone wrong. But Daniel knew better. He had seen the creature with his own eyes. He thought back to the times he and Mark would stay up late, working on their latest tech projects. Mark had always been the genius, able to find information that others couldn't. Daniel knew he could count on Mark to help him uncover the truth behind the flute and the creature. Determined to uncover the truth, Daniel began his investigation. He started by researching local folklore and ancient artifacts, hoping to find a connection to the flute and the creature. His first stop was the city library, where he pored over old books and newspapers, looking for any mention of similar incidents. It was there that he confided in his childhood friend, Sarah Thompson, a historian with a deep knowledge of the city's past. Sarah listened intently as Daniel recounted the events of the previous night, her eyes widening with a mix of fascination and concern. "Daniel, this sounds like something out of a horror story," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But if it's real, we need to be careful. There are forces at play that we don't understand." Daniel remembered the times they had spent together, exploring the city's hidden secrets. Sarah had always been the one to push him out of his comfort zone, encouraging him to take risks. He knew he could count on her to help him uncover the truth. Together, they scoured the library's archives, looking for any reference to a shadow flute or a creature that could be summoned by music. It wasn't until they found an old, leather-bound book tucked away in a forgotten corner that they struck gold. The book, titled Forgotten Legends of Buckley, contained a vague reference to a flute that could summon a shadow creature. The flute was crafted in a monastery in the Blackthorn Mountains. Daniel read aloud. It was said to be a weapon, used by a secretive sect to strike fear into the hearts of their enemies. Sarah looked at Daniel, her expression grave. "We need to find out more about this monastery and the flute. If what you saw is connected to this, we could be dealing with something very dangerous. Daniel knew he couldn't do it alone, so he turned to his childhood friends Mark Reynolds, a tech expert, and Lisa Carter, a paranormal enthusiast. He remembered the times they had spent together, exploring the city's hidden secrets and uncovering its darkest truths. They had always been there for each other, and he knew he could count on them now. Mark was skeptical but agreed to help, while Lisa's curiosity was piqued by the ancient artifact's dark powers. As they delved deeper into their investigation, strange occurrences began happening around Daniel. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and he felt a constant sense of being watched. One night, as he was leaving his office, he saw a figure standing at the end of the street. It was Marianne. Her eyes locked onto his as she played a single, haunting note on her flute. Daniel felt a wave of terror wash over him as the shadows around him seemed to come alive. He turned and ran, the sound of the flute echoing in his ears. He knew that they were getting too close to the truth, and that Marianne would stop at nothing to protect the flute. But he also knew that he couldn't turn back now. He had to find a way to destroy the flute and stop the creature before it was too late. The journey to the Blackthorn Mountains was treacherous, the winding roads and dense forests making it difficult to navigate. But Daniel and his friends were determined to reach the monastery and uncover the secrets of the flute. As they approached the monastery, a sense of foreboding washed over them. The ancient stone structure stood tall against the backdrop of the mountains, its windows dark and empty. It was as if the very air around them was charged with a sense of dread. Daniel remembered the times he and his friends had explored abandoned buildings, their laughter echoing through the empty halls. But this was different. The monastery seemed to radiate a dark energy, a sense of foreboding that sent a chill down his spine. They were greeted by Father Thomas, an old monk who had spent his life studying the monastery's history. He listened to their story with a grave expression, his eyes reflecting a deep sadness. "The flute you speak of is indeed a dark artifact," Father Thomas said. "It was crafted centuries ago by a secretive sect that sought to harness the power of the shadows. They believed that by summoning the creature, they could strike fear into the hearts of their enemies and bend them to their will." He led them to a hidden chamber deep within the monastery, where ancient texts and artifacts were kept. Among them was a detailed account of the flute's creation and the ritual used to summon the creature. "But be warned," Father Thomas said, his voice trembling. "The flute is not just a tool. It is a prison, and the creature is its warden. To destroy the flute is to risk unleashing the creature upon the world in a way that cannot be controlled." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the gravity of their mission. They were not just dealing with an ancient artifact, but with a force that could potentially destroy the world as they knew it. Back in the city, the group felt a growing sense of urgency. They knew that Marianne was still out there, and that she would stop at nothing to protect the flute. They decided to split up, each taking a different approach to gathering information. Daniel and Sarah visited local music shops and antique dealers, hoping to find someone who knew about the flute or had seen Marianne. Their search led them to Emily Hart, a musicologist who specialized in ancient instruments. Emily was initially skeptical, but her curiosity was piqued when Daniel mentioned the flute. Daniel remembered the times he and Sarah had spent together exploring the city's hidden secrets. Sarah had always been the one to push him out of his comfort zone, encouraging him to take risks. He knew he could count on her to help him uncover the truth. "I've studied ancient instruments from all over the world," Emily said, "but I've never heard of a flute with the power to summon a creature. If what you're saying is true, this could be a discovery of immense significance." She agreed to join their quest, bringing her expertise and knowledge to the table. Together, they pored over ancient texts and musical scores, looking for any reference to the flute or the ritual used to summon the creature. Meanwhile, Mark and Lisa delved into the city's dark underbelly, searching for any mention of Marianne or the flute in underground forums and paranormal circles. Their search led them to a hidden network of individuals who believed in the supernatural and were willing to share information. But as they dug deeper, they realized that they were not the only ones searching for the truth. Marianne was watching their every move, her presence a constant shadow in their lives. She seemed to know their every step, always staying one step ahead. One night, as Daniel was leaving Emily's apartment, he saw Marianne standing across the street. She raised the flute to her lips and played a single, haunting note. Daniel felt a wave of terror wash over him as the shadows around him seemed to come alive. He knew that they were getting too close to the truth, and that Marianne would stop at nothing to protect the flute. But he also knew that they couldn't turn back now. They had to find a way to destroy the flute and stop the creature before it was too late. The group's investigation had led them to a hidden chamber beneath the city where ancient artifacts and texts were kept. They believed that the key to destroying the flute lay within these texts, and they were determined to find it. As they searched, Daniel remembered the times he and his friends had explored hidden chambers and secret passages, their laughter echoing through the empty halls. But this was different. The chamber seemed to radiate a dark energy, a sense of foreboding that sent a chill down his spine. Their fears were realized when the creature struck. It emerged from the shadows, its form shifting and writhing like smoke. Mark, who had been researching the flute's origins online, was the first to fall. He didn't even have time to scream before the creature struck him down, his body convulsing as if struck by an unseen force. Daniel remembered the times he and Mark had spent together, working on their latest tech projects. Mark had always been the genius, able to find information that others couldn't. Daniel felt a pang of guilt as he realized that Mark's curiosity had led him to his death. The group was devastated, their grief and fear threatening to overwhelm them. But they knew that they couldn't give up. They had to find a way to destroy the flute and stop the creature before it could claim another victim. Emily, her eyes filled with tears, found an ancient text that described a ritual to destroy the flute. It was a dangerous ritual, one that required a great sacrifice, but they knew that it was their only hope. "We have to do this," Emily said, her voice trembling. "We have to destroy the flute and stop the creature, no matter the cost." The group agreed, their resolve strengthening. They would perform the ritual during the next lunar eclipse, using the power of the moon to destroy the flute and banish the creature forever. But as they prepared, they knew that Marianne would not go down without a fight. She was a formidable foe, and she would stop at nothing to protect the flute and its dark power. They had to be ready for whatever she threw at them, and they had to be willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. The days leading up to the lunar eclipse were filled with tension and fear. The group knew that they were running out of time, and that Marianne was watching their every move. They worked tirelessly to gather the necessary items for the ritual, their determination never wavering. Sarah remembered the time she and Daniel had spent together, exploring the city's hidden secrets. Daniel had always been the one to push her out of her comfort zone, encouraging her to take risks. She knew she could count on him to help her perform the ritual and destroy the flute. Sarah, with her deep knowledge of ancient rituals, took the lead in preparing for the ceremony. She studied the ancient text, memorizing every word and gesture. She knew that the slightest mistake could have catastrophic consequences, and she was determined to get it right. Emily, meanwhile, worked on deciphering the musical score that was part of the ritual. She knew that the music was the key to summoning the creature and binding it to the flute. She practiced tirelessly, her fingers moving with a grace and precision that belied the danger of their mission. Daniel and Lisa, on the other hand, focused on gathering the physical items needed for the ritual. They scoured the city, searching for rare herbs and ancient artifacts. Their search led them to hidden shops and secretive dealers, each step bringing them closer to their goal. But as they prepared, they felt a growing sense of unease. The air was thick with tension, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. They knew that Marianne was close, and that she would stop at nothing to protect the flute. Their fears were realized when Lisa betrayed them. She had been secretly communicating with Marianne, drawn in by her promises of power and immortality. She revealed their plan to Marianne, hoping to gain her favor. The group was devastated, their trust shattered. But they knew that they couldn't give up. They had to find a way to perform the ritual and destroy the flute before it was too late. With Lisa's betrayal, the group knew that they had to act quickly. They set a trap for Marianne, intending to perform the ritual during the lunar eclipse. They chose an abandoned church on the outskirts of the city, its dark and foreboding atmosphere the perfect setting for their plan. Sarah remembered the times she and Daniel had spent together exploring abandoned buildings and uncovering their secrets. The church seemed to radiate a dark energy, a sense of foreboding that sent a chill down her spine. But she knew they had to be brave. They had to perform the ritual and destroy the flute, no matter the cost. Sarah and Emily worked tirelessly to prepare the church, setting up the necessary items for the ritual. They knew that they had only one chance to get it right, and they were determined to make it count. Daniel, meanwhile, focused on protecting the group. He knew that Marianne would not go down without a fight, and he was prepared to do whatever it took to keep his friends safe. He set up traps and barriers around the church, using his knowledge of the city's hidden secrets to their advantage. As the lunar eclipse approached, the group felt a growing sense of tension. They knew that the time for action was near, and they were ready to face whatever came their way. But as they waited, they felt a growing sense of unease. The air was thick with tension, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. They knew that Marianne was close, and that she would stop at nothing to protect the flute. Their fears were realized when Marianne arrived, her eyes filled with a dark and twisted power. She raised the flute to her lips and played a haunting melody, the notes echoing through the church like a cold embrace. The creature emerged from the shadows, its form shifting and writhing like smoke. The group knew that the time for action had come, and they were ready to face their destiny. As the creature loomed over them, the group knew that they had to act quickly. They had only one chance to perform the ritual and destroy the flute, and they were determined to make it count. Sarah remembered the times she and Daniel had spent together, facing their fears and overcoming obstacles. She knew they had to be brave. They had to perform the ritual and destroy the flute, no matter the cost. Sarah began the ritual, her voice echoing through the church as she recited the ancient words. The air was thick with tension, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. They knew that the slightest mistake could have catastrophic consequences, and they were determined to get it right. Emily, meanwhile, played the musical score that was part of the ritual. Her fingers moved with a grace and precision that belied the danger of their mission. The music filled the church, its haunting melody binding the creature to the flute. Daniel, on the other hand, focused on protecting the group. He knew that Marianne would not go down without a fight, and he was prepared to do whatever it took to keep his friends safe. He fought with a fierce determination, his every move calculated and precise. But as they performed the ritual, they realized that someone would have to make the ultimate sacrifice. The ritual required a life to be given in exchange for the destruction of the flute, and they knew that it was the only way to stop the creature. Emily, her eyes filled with tears, volunteered to be the one to play the flute and summon the creature. She knew the risks, but she also knew that it was the only way to save the world from the darkness that threatened to consume it. As Emily played the flute, the creature emerged from the shadows, its form shifting and writhing like smoke. The group knew that the time for action had come, and they were ready to face their destiny. Sarah remembered the times she and Emily had spent together, exploring the city's hidden secrets and uncovering its darkest truths. Emily had always been the brave one, willing to take risks and face her fears. Sarah knew she had to be brave too. She had to perform the ritual and destroy the flute, no matter the cost. Sarah continued the ritual, her voice echoing through the church as she recited the ancient words. The air was thick with tension, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. They knew that the slightest mistake could have catastrophic consequences, and they were determined to get it right. Daniel fought with a fierce determination, his every move calculated and precise. He knew that Marianne would not go down without a fight, and he was prepared to do whatever it took to keep his friends safe. But as they performed the ritual, they felt a growing sense of unease. The air was thick with tension, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. They knew that Marianne was close, and that she would stop at nothing to protect the flute. Their fears were realized when Marianne attacked, her eyes filled with a dark and twisted power. She fought with a fierce determination, her every move calculated and precise. The group knew that they had to act quickly, and they were ready to face whatever came their way. As the battle raged on, the group knew that they were running out of time. They had to complete the ritual and destroy the flute before it was too late. Sarah remembered the times she and Emily had spent together, facing their fears and overcoming obstacles. She knew they had to be brave. They had to perform the ritual and destroy the flute, no matter the cost. Sarah continued the ritual, her voice echoing through the church as she recited the ancient words. The air was thick with tension, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. They knew that the slightest mistake could have catastrophic consequences, and they were determined to get it right. Emily, meanwhile, played the flute with a fierce determination, her every note binding the creature to the instrument. She knew that she was risking her life, but she also knew that it was the only way to save the world from the darkness that threatened to consume it. Daniel fought with a fierce determination, his every move calculated and precise. He knew that Marianne would not go down without a fight, and he was prepared to do whatever it took to keep his friends safe. But as they performed the ritual, they realized that the time for sacrifice had come. Emily, her eyes filled with tears, played the final note, her life force binding the creature to the flute. The instrument shattered, and the creature vanished in a scream of shadows. Marianne, her curse lifted, collapsed to the ground, her body aging rapidly as the darkness that had sustained her for so long was banished. The group watched in awe as the ancient evil was finally destroyed, their hearts filled with a mix of grief and relief. In the days that followed, the group struggled to come to terms with what had happened. They had lost so much, but they had also gained a newfound sense of purpose. They knew that they had saved the world from a darkness that threatened to consume it, and they were determined to honor the sacrifices that had been made. Daniel remembered the times he and his friends had spent together, exploring the city's hidden secrets and uncovering its darkest truths. They had always been there for each other, and he knew they would continue to be there, no matter what the future held. Daniel, Sarah, and Emily were hailed as heroes, their names forever etched in the annals of history. They had faced the ultimate evil and emerged victorious, their courage and determination a beacon of hope in a world that had been shrouded in darkness. But as they looked to the future, they knew that their journey was far from over. There were still mysteries to uncover and battles to be fought, and they knew that the darkness, though banished for now, would one day return. In the depths of the shadows, something stirred. A new evil, born from the remnants of the creature and the flute, began to take shape. It was a darkness unlike anything they had ever faced, and it hungered for vengeance. With their heads held high and their hearts filled with determination, they stepped into the unknown, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. For they were the guardians of the light, and they would never let the darkness consume the world again. But little did they know, the true horror was yet to come. The creature, though banished, had left a part of itself behind, a seed of darkness that would one day grow and consume everything in its path. And when that day came, they would be ready. For they were the last line of defense against the encroaching night, and they would never surrender to the shadows. The weeks following the harrowing ordeal at the abandoned church were a blur of grief and introspection for Daniel and Sarah. The city of Buckley, once a familiar comfort, now felt alien and foreboding. Every shadow seemed to whisper secrets, and every corner held the potential for unseen horrors. Daniel found himself often sitting in silence at his apartment, staring at the walls lined with notes and photographs from their investigation. He would trace the edges of a photo of Emily, her smile frozen in time, a stark contrast to the grim reality of her sacrifice. He remembered the countless nights they had spent poring over ancient texts, Emily's fingers dancing over the pages as she deciphered the musical scores. Her laughter echoed in his memories, a haunting reminder of what they had lost. Sarah, too, was haunted by the past. She would often visit the city library, sitting in the same corner where they had first discovered the reference to the shadow flute. The weight of the ancient book in her hands was a tangible connection to the journey they had undertaken. She remembered the determination in Daniel's eyes as they embarked on their quest, the unwavering resolve that had driven them forward. But now, that resolve was tempered by a profound sense of loss and the gnawing fear that the darkness was not truly vanquished. One evening, as Daniel and Sarah sat together in his apartment, the silence between them was heavy with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Sarah broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think we did the right thing, Daniel? Did we truly save the city, or did we just delay the inevitable?" Daniel looked at her, his eyes reflecting the same uncertainty that plagued his heart. "I don't know, Sarah, but I do know that we couldn't have just stood by and done nothing. We had to try, no matter the cost." Sarah nodded, her gaze drifting to the window where the fading light of the day cast long shadows across the room. "But at what cost, Daniel? We lost so much. Mark, Emily, they gave everything. And for what? A temporary respite from the darkness." Daniel reached out, taking her hand in his. "We honor their sacrifice by continuing to fight, Sarah, by never giving up, no matter how dark the path ahead may seem. We owe it to them to keep going, to keep searching for the truth." Sarah squeezed his hand, a flicker of determination in her eyes. "You're right, Daniel. We can't let their sacrifices be in vain. We have to keep fighting, no matter what." As the days turned into weeks, Daniel and Sarah began to notice strange occurrences around the city. Whispers of unexplained phenomena and sightings of shadowy figures began to surface, echoing the events that had led them to the shadow flute. It seemed as though the darkness, though momentarily banished, was beginning to seep back into the world. One afternoon, as they sat in a quiet cafe, Daniel shared his concerns with Sarah. "I've been hearing rumors, Sarah. Stories of people seeing things in the shadows, of unexplained disappearances. It's like the darkness is returning, but in a different form." Sarah's eyes widened with a mix of fear and curiosity. "Do you think it's connected to the flute, to Marianne and the creature we faced?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, his mind racing with possibilities. "I don't know, but I think we need to find out. We can't ignore these signs, Sarah. If the darkness is returning, we have to be ready to face it again." Sarah nodded, her resolve strengthening. "You're right, Daniel. We can't turn a blind eye to what's happening. We have to investigate, to uncover the truth behind these new mysteries." They spent the next few days gathering information, visiting the same hidden corners of the city, where they had once searched for clues about the shadow flute. The familiar sense of urgency and determination began to replace the grief and uncertainty that had plagued them. As they delved deeper into their investigation, they discovered references to an ancient artifact known as the obsidian mirror. According to legend, the mirror was said to be a gateway to a realm of shadows, a place where the darkness that had been banished could find a way back into the world. Daniel and Sarah exchanged a glance, the weight of their discovery settling over them. Do you think this mirror is connected to the flute? Sarah asked, her voice tinged with a mix of fear and excitement. Daniel nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. I do, Sarah. And if it is, we have to find it before the darkness can use it to return. We have to stop it, no matter the cost.